Welcome to the second episode of the MMA Lotcast this week. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned when you're researching these upcoming MMA events. With over 3,800 fighter profiles available for you to work through and research through, we ensure that you have as many direct links to past fights for all the competitors on these upcoming events so that you can go out there and study, whether it's to break down, handicap, game plan. We have so many different types of people on this service, from commentators to coaches to fighters to analysts to handicappers to just casual fans. We have over 75 currently signed up members as well, and you can try it out for free with a 7-day free trial as well and get access to over, like I said, 3,800 fighter profiles spanning 17 different promotions from all over the world. Check it out. 7-day free trial available. Link in the description below. All right, this week, we already did the UFC breakdown for you guys a couple of days ago, and now today we're going to be getting into the PFL breakdown, which actually goes down on Thursday. This is the second round of regular season matchups for the PFL, and this week they're taking care of heavyweights and women's flyweights as well. The interesting thing to note here for the heavyweight standings, only 3 fighters competing on this card actually have points in the standings right now, as the other opponent or fighters have actually pulled out of the card due to injury or various other reasons. Valentin Moldavsky, Oleg Popov, and Denis Goltsov are the only guys competing on this card on Thursday that have points. Moldavsky, number 1 place with 6 points. Popov tied in second place with Daniel James, although I believe Popov has a quicker victory, if I'm not mistaken. Denis Goltsov, 4th place with 4 points. Sergey Belostini, 3 points. And then from there, we have Linton Vassell returning, who ended up losing his first fight. Marcelo Golm returning, who lost his first fight. And then we have 5 new heavyweights jumping in to try to save this roster here in the form of Tim Johnson, Danilo Marques, Davion Franklin, Tyrell Fortune, and Thiago Santos. Very interesting thing going there. But with the women's flyweight, everybody's still in tow here from the first round of fights that they had back in April. So no real changes there. So interesting dynamic there for the heavyweights. So 11 fights to break down here. We'll have already have track plays for this card available on the Patreon page. So if you want to check that out, check the link in the description below. Also, we'll give you access to all the UFC content that we got coming up. So check out the Lock of the Night Patreon page. And without further ado, we'll get right into the breakdowns here. Again, not going to go as in-depth as I normally go with the UFC. I'll give brief breakdowns here for every single matchup, give my pick, and give a quick reasoning as to why I believe that person wins. First fight of the night, Sumiko Inaba coming in at -700, going up against Sergey Orozco. I actually believe that this is a showcase matchup. No, it is actually for the... it is a showcase matchup. It is not actually for the standings here, but Inaba coming in at -700, her opponent coming in at +500. Last time around, Inaba actually dropped her first ever professional loss at the hands of Denise Keelholz, and that was a matchup where we saw that the power and the speed of Keelholz was really touching up Inaba and causing her a lot of trouble. Inaba normally showcases a lot of movement, long-range weapons, and good combination striking, usually touching up her opponents and sometimes even putting them away. Orozco comes from the Mexican regional scene, where she's actually a Lux Fight Championship or a Lux Fight League champion in the strawweight division, but the opponents that she's been beating have been very low level, and you can see when she's going up against somebody that will provide actual resistance, she ends up coming up on the short end of the stick. -700, a little bit too wide for me, my liking, in terms of putting into parlays, but Inaba should go out there and win this matchup. The under 2.5 has me a little bit intrigued at plus money, as I believe that there's a big enough skill gap between the two here that Inaba could actually be effective and get a finish, but all in all, I'll likely end up passing on this matchup. Next up, we got Juliana Velasquez coming in at -500, going up against Lisa Mauldin. Velasquez on a 3-fight losing streak. All 3 the only losses in her professional career, and they all came at the hands of Liz Carmouche. Each matchup ended up getting tougher and tougher for Velasquez, as the first one ended up being a close fight that ended with a, in my opinion, premature stoppage in favor of Liz Carmouche to end up defeating Velasquez and winning the title that night. They rematched quickly thereafter. We saw Carmouche put a stamp on that matchup by getting a second round submission victory. And then they met up again back in April. For some reason, the PFL put them together again, and we saw Carmouche go out there and outgrind her. Velasquez normally likes to utilize a grapple-heavy approach, utilizing her physicality, putting opponents in bad positions, and grinding them out from that top spot. She is getting older in age. I believe she's 37 now as well, so that's something to keep an eye on. And she's going up against Lisa Mauldin, who pulled off two pretty solid upset victories through her PFL Challenger Series back, I believe, in 2022, and then she followed that, 2023, and then she followed it up with another victory over Desiree Yanez back on a PFL event last year. Now she jumped into the PFL tournament and ultimately ended up coming up short against likely the favorite in the whole tournament, in Dakota Ditcheva, who was able to put her away in the first round. But Mauldin normally likes to showcase a grapple-heavy approach in her own right, has some slick jiu-jitsu as well, where we've seen her be able to snatch up a couple submissions as well, and she could make things shaky here for Velasquez if her confidence is completely shot, right? To go out there and be on a 3-fight losing streak and get dominated pretty much, at least in the last two matchups, it might do a lot for her confidence. But in terms of a skill gap, I do think she is the superior grappler here, and I think she'll be far more physical than Mauldin, but I just don't like how wide the line is in this spot. Mauldin could make things tricky with her jiu-jitsu, but I think Velasquez is just better overall here, and add in the physicality factor, I expect Velasquez to go out there and still get the decision victory. Next up, we got Danilo Marques coming in at plus 185, going up against Tim Johnson, who comes in at minus 220. Both these guys, late replacements, I guess, into the heavyweight tournament here. Danilo Marques is coming off of a pedestrian-like decision victory over Satoshi Ishii in a matchup where he was able to establish his range, use his 1-2s down the middle, and his high kick to keep Inaba at range, and then, or not Inaba, sorry, Ishii, keeping Ishii at range. And once Ishii finally decided to just crash the pocket and crowd the pocket, he was able to have a lot of success in the third round, pushing Marques up against the cage and keeping him uncomfortable. If Ishii did that a little bit easier, which I don't think would have been that hard considering the lack of knockout threat from the Marques side of things, Ishii probably could have ended up getting his hand raised that night. Marques either goes out there and trots around at distance, landing high kicks, or is able to relentlessly grapple and try to implement his BJJ black belt. He's getting up there in age. I believe he's 38, 39 years old at this point in time, and he's just not, I think he's more so doing it for the paychecks and just trying to cruise to victories when he's able to get the chance to do so. His opponent, Tim Johnson, had a little bit of a rough run in the Bellator cage when he made their debut with them in 2018, went on a 2-fight losing streak, got a 3-fight winning streak, which earned him a title fight against Valentin Moldavsky. That spurred a 3-fight losing streak, but he did end his career with Bellator with a solid victory over Saeed Soma, putting on a classic Tim Johnson performance, pushing him up against the cage and utilizing a lot of grinding style to keep him uncomfortable. He did manage to stay active on the regional scene back in April, where he picked up a quick victory over a tomato can from the regional scene, but now here he is to jump into the PFL for the first time and try to follow his dreams to become a millionaire off of just fighting alone here. So, I think stylistically speaking, this is a great matchup for Tim Johnson. 5 out of the last 6 losses on Tim Johnson's record have come by knockout, so you wonder a little bit about the durability. But once you read into the fact that Danilo Marques has not earned a knockout victory since 2015, where he finished a guy that was 0-3, you start to realize that he doesn't present a lot of threat or finishing threat in the striking realm. A lot of it's kind of just for show and just try to get a little respect with the high kicks that he throws. But I think Tim Johnson will be able to stay in his chest, push him up against the cage, maybe land a takedown or two, although I think that might be a little bit risky considering the black belt that Marques has. But I don't think that Marques has a type of black belt that's going to cause Johnson a whole lot of issues here. I think if Johnson just looks to rough him up against the cage, maybe break away, throw some big shots, he could potentially get a knockout victory of his own, especially in this circumstance. He'll need some big points if he hopes to make it to the playoffs, and getting a quick knockout here over Marques is absolutely possible, especially when you saw what Marcelo Nunes was able to do last year to Danilo Marques. So I do like Johnson here. I think he's the better veteran. I think he has the perfect style to negate the cruising-like striking style of Marques, and I would be surprised if Johnson just stays that distance and allow Marques to pick him apart, just as he was able to do against Ishii. So give me Johnson. I think Johnson actually ends up knocking him out in this spot as well. Next up, we got Alara Joanne coming in at -135, going up against Shanna Young. Joanne 11-9, salty record now. You're seeing that she's starting to come up short against fighters that are better or more well-rounded than her. Normally, she shows in a very aggressive style, throwing wild winging hooks, crashing in the pocket, very aggressive when she feels that she can dictate the pace. Doesn't have a bad takedown game as well, although I'm not super impressed with her ability to, navigate the grappling realm. She's kind of just been relegated to playing from guard and just, throwing big shots from there, never really looking to advance or anything like that. But when she is fighting more skilled opponents, that's where you see her start to come up short. And I think she could be into some trouble here against Shanna Young, who might be able to utilize her physicality against Joanne, take her to the ground, grind her out from that top position, or even in the striking realm. I think that Young has a nice, clean, crisp, straight down the pipe that could cause Joanne a ton of trouble, especially when Joanne is crashing in the pocket as recklessly as she has done so in the past. So I do like Young here as a slight underdog. I do think she has the chops to make this a very rough night for Joanne, as long as she doesn't allow Joanne to dictate the pace too much here without at least providing some resistance in terms of counters or takedowns. But I think that Young has a cleaner technique and has a good enough ability to execute a game plan to defeat somebody of Joanne's skill set. So give me Young as the underdog here to pull off an upset. And, I think, Young by knockout is +1,000. If, she plays that Matador game, she could land a big shot on Joanne to put her down. But again, it's only due to the odds. +1,000 might be worth a little bit of a sprinkle, but just straight up on her money line, not bad either. All right, Marcelo Golm coming in at +145, going up against Tyrell Fortune, who comes in at -170. Golm is now 0-2 against Daniel James over his last couple of fights. We saw him winning pretty much the majority of both of those matchups before James was able to flip the script and land his big shots and eventually put him away. It was very weird to see him last time around have about 4 minutes of control time, having a very good success in terms of riding him on the cage, landing some big shots, but then he got reversed. James was able to get top position, rain down big shots, and it seems like Golm kind of just gave up on himself there. Normally, Golm, solid boxer, good crisp striking, has a good calf kicking game when he wants to lean on it, and he does a great job in terms of masking his takedowns behind his striking if he wants to mix up his game as well as he can at times. His opponent this week in Tyrell Fortune obviously comes from a accredited collegiate wrestling background. It's been a while since we've seen him in the cage because the last time he actually won was due to a DQ, due to Sergey Belostini hitting him to the back of the head repeatedly and eventually getting DQ'd due to that. He was scheduled to fight Marcelo going back in November, but that never ended up coming to fruition. Fortune was then scheduled to fight Daniel James in April. He was forced to pull out of that matchup as well. And now PFL looking to put this matchup back together after they, like I said, were originally scheduled to fight in November. That time, Marcelo Golm was closer to, I believe, +115. And now we're seeing a little bit wider of a line here due to, I think, the recency bias on what Golm has looked like against Daniel James as of late. I don't think Tyrell Fortune has that big knockout power that Golm has to worry about. I think Golm can stay competitive here. Early will be a big indicator of how he will fare for the rest of the matchup. If he can survive early, have some good success of his own, force Tyrell Fortune to work, he could be the better fighter in deeper water here. So I do lean ever so slightly to Golm, but again, seeing him give up and kind of just break the way that he did against Daniel James last time around does not give me a whole lot of confidence in this spot, but I still do lean on the Golm side, as I think he, as a complete mixed martial artist, he brings a little bit more to the table than Tyrell Fortune, strictly with Fortune's wrestling game. So give me Golm inside the distance, but pass overall here. Next up, Oleg Popov coming in at -265, going up against Davion Franklin, who comes in at +225. Last time around, Popov was able to get the crucifix position against Steve Mowry, rain down some big shots, and eventually get the stoppage there. We know what he normally brings to the table. He likes to grind. He likes to stay in his opponent's face, push them up against the cage, drag them to the ground, smother them from that top position, slowly work to a position that he can eventually look to get a submission or look to get a TKO of some sort. Obviously, trained by Fedor Emelianenko, you expect him to have some solid fight IQ, some good defense, as we did see in the Mowry fight last time around, where Mowry was able to get the back of him in the first round after a reversal, but we saw patience, discipline, and good technique from Popov to eventually roll out of that spot and get the reversal, land some big shots of his own, but then eventually get the stoppage in the second round the way that he did. Solid 15-fight winning streak that he's on right now. He only lost his third professional fight, and then after that, it's been nothing but dubs for him. His opponent, Davion Franklin, coming in as a decent underdog here, suffered his second professional defeat last time around to Slim Trabelsi, but unfortunately that came due to an injury that he suffered when his opponent landed a takedown on him. Franklin is a guy that packs a huge amount of power in his punches and his kicks, and he's very live to finish his opponents early. Otherwise, he does tend to start to slow down and start giving up those positions. He has won a couple of decisions as well, where he's been able to, Derek Lewis his way back to his feet after getting grinded out, landing big shots, and then swing judges back into his favor due to the damage that he's landing. But that's going to get harder to do with the level of competition that he continues to take in terms of moving up in the toughness of opponents that he's going up against. And that's where he's facing here in Oleg Popov, who'll do a great job in terms of holding him down and landing good enough damage from that top position to kind of nullify any success Franklin may end up having if he's able to work himself back to his feet. This is the first fight for Franklin since he seemingly injured himself against Slim Trabelsi late last year. And I believe he's coming in on somewhat short notice in the spot. I do think Popov is way more prepared for this matchup, and I think we'll see him put on a classic Popov performance, eventually getting Franklin out of there in the second or third round. Next up, we got Taila Santos coming in at minus 500 going up against Jenna Bishop, who comes in at plus 375. Now, Taila Santos, probably one of the more surprising signings for the PFL, especially considering that Santos had that very close fight against Valentina Shevchenko for the title. She lost that fight, had a long layoff and injury that she was coming off of, ended up fighting Erin Blanchfield in a matchup where she ended up having solid success in the first round, and then she gassed out and lost the second and third rounds, and then the UFC decided to let her go, which was a bit of a puzzling maneuver. But Taila Santos, I guess, trying to go for the money here, getting the $1 million prize if she's able to be successful in this season. We know what she's good at. She has some good power striking techniques. She's very strong when she's able to get takedowns and smother her opponents, just as we saw in her PFL debut against Hilary Joanne, where she was able to get a body lock takedown and then from there work to the back and get that rear naked choke. But she does have a bit of a cardio issue at times, especially when she's dealing with somebody that's going to provide a high pace and a high level of activity. Now, Jenna Bishop, third-degree BJJ black belt, started MMA a little bit too late, but still has found massive success as she is undefeated through, I believe, her 6 or 7 fight professional MMA career. She's showcasing that she can go out there and grind out opponents over 15 minutes if that's what she needs to do. Also, she shows that she can go out there and submit opponents off her back or from the top position, but it came from the back last time around against Chelsea Hackett as she got the first round armbar victory. She's very good in the jiu-jitsu realm. She's very tough to deal with and try to control when she gets on her back or even into the grappling realm whatsoever. She trains at the Alliance with the Alliance crew. I'm not sure if that is a gym anymore, but you see the familiar faces, the Angela Hills, the Jessica Pennes, the Phil Davises, the Wilson Hayes. They're always training with the same group of people, and you know that she's getting great MMA training from those guys, and which is why she was actually able to pick up victories against eventual UFC signees, Luana Santos and Diani Barbosa. She's good. She deserves respect. She deserves more respect than the plus 375, plus 400 line that I saw on her earlier today. So taking a small shot on Jenna Bishop here is not a bad shot at all. I think there's a lot of prestige hooked up to the Taila Santos name because of that close fight she had with Valentina Shevchenko and because she is a former UFC fighter. But Bishop is undefeated for a reason. She will obviously be at a bit of a striking disadvantage here, but I think she can do a good enough job in terms of staying safe in those positions, maybe engaging in the clinch, looking for some takedowns. Her takedowns really are not that bad for somebody that comes from a BJJ background, and I think she could wear on Santos here and probably have some success of her own. Again, Santos, it's possible that she can get that early finish here with her striking alone. But if Bishop is able to push this into deeper waters, don't be surprised if she's the better jiu-jitsu player when this fight hits the mat and she's able to either catch Taila Santos in something or at least pull off reversals and get the better of these grappling positions. So I think Bishop is primed to pull off an upset in this spot. I might be called crazy for this matchup, but if you have been watching Bishop's career, she offers up some very good chances to pull off a huge upset here against Taila Santos, who, again, bit of a cardio issue. And if you don't have the gas tank to showcase your skill advantage, then you're kind of left wondering, like, how am I supposed to win this fight? And that could end up happening here. So I'm going to take a long shot here on Bishop to pull off the upset and get this victory over Taila Santos. All right, next up, we got Liz Carmouche coming in at minus 310, rematching Kana Watanabe coming in at plus 260. It's crazy that Liz Carmouche has been undefeated since leaving the UFC, or at least being let go by the UFC, as she's won 8 fights in a row, which included winning the Bellator title and defending it a few times before ending up coming into this PFL season where she picked up that win over Juliana Velasquez back in April. A lot of her victories have come from her being able to implement her physicality, taking opponents to the ground and grinding them out. Her striking is not that bad either, and we saw her leg kicks on display when she defeated her former teammate Ilima Leigh McFarlane with a barrage of leg kicks and eventually getting that finish in the championship rounds. She's 40 years old. She's getting up there in age, right? She's pretty much up there, but her physicality has shown recently that she can still be competitive. Her opponent, Kana Watanabe, put a solid beatdown on Shanna Young last time around, where she was able to continuously get into the grappling exchanges, where she's usually very powerful and very dangerous and very difficult to deal with when she's able to secure that top position. And she just gets these takedowns and throws and trips from such weird angles that not a lot of opponents are able to pick up how she's going to be attacking them. Her striking, she's kind of starting to just bite down on her mouthpiece and throw with heat now. Not a lot of technique, which is how she ended up losing her first matchup to Liz Carmouche, as Carmouche kind of just bull rushed her way through the pocket and landed big strikes and eventually hurt Watanabe very badly. But when Watanabe can get a hold of her opponents and get them to the ground, she looks like a pretty damn good fighter. It's just that gap that she needs to fill in terms of the striking flaw that she has in her game. Now, I understand why Liz Carmouche is the big favorite here, but one thing that comes to my mind, or a couple of things that come to my mind with Liz Carmouche is we've seen her get grinded out in the grappling round before. You know, we saw Deanna Bennett grind her out for about 3.5 rounds before Carmouche was able to flip the script and get a submission victory of her own. We saw Juliana Velasquez have some grappling success in the first round of their matchup, first few rounds of their first matchup that they had a year or two back, and Carmouche kind of struggled in those spots. Obviously, she battled back and eventually won those fights, but if Watanabe is able to secure some takedowns here and get some control time, it would not surprise me in the least bit. So I'm still going to lean Carmouche here because I do think she is the more complete fighter, and I think she'll do a good enough job defensively speaking in the grappling exchanges, likely looking to keep this fight in the striking round where she'll have a clear advantage. But if they do get tied up and, get sent to the mat, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Watanabe is able to make this much closer than the, 75% indicates on Liz Carmouche. So I would not be parlaying Carmouche in this spot. I think she wins, but this fight will likely play out closer than the odds suggest. So maybe even a little bit of a sprinkle on Watanabe, not a bad way to go about it. But I'm still going to pick Carmouche to win this fight by decision. All right, next up, we got Dennis Goltsov. I was going to call him Denise for a second. Dennis Goltsov coming in at minus 500, taking off Thiago Santos, who comes in at plus 375. Now, last time around, Goltsov was able to deal with a grapple-heavy approach from Vassell early, and then eventually get his game going in the second and third round, where he was eventually able to get a TKO in the final round of that matchup. Goltsov showcased solid discipline and patience, while Vassell was looking to hold him to the ground, but Vassell clearly gassed himself out trying to maintain that top position, and then Goltsov was able to take advantage of that in the second and third rounds, implementing his own grapple-heavy approach, wearing on Vassell, and then eventually putting him away. Goltsov has some solid striking of his own. He's just had some lapse in judgment in terms of his striking defense at times, which has caused him some issues in the past, most notably last time around in the finals of last year's PFL tournament, where he ended up getting knocked out by Hedin Ferreira in the second round of their matchup. But if he can tighten up those striking defense issues, this guy is PFL champion worthy, without a doubt, right? Like, this is a guy that is probably the best fighter on the PFL roster that has never won a PFL tournament. He's gotten so close so many times, but just ends up losing in most crucial moments. And in this matchup specifically, he's going to have to get some points if he wants to ensure that he can hold on to that PFL roster spot or that playoff spot here. Going up against Thiago Santos, last time we saw Santos was in February, where he was on the PFL versus Bellator card as he took on Yoel Romero, and seemed to be muzzled in that matchup as Romero pretty much dictated the pace of it and landed the better strikes, ultimately handing Thiago Santos a decision loss that night. Santos, 40 years old, really starting to slow down at this stage of his career, not as much of a knockout threat as he used to be. He's a guy that can be grinded out, as we saw against Rob Wilkinson in his PFL debut. he just doesn't have it anymore, in my opinion. And now he's stepping in on short notice at heavyweight. I think he's just kind of just doing it for the paycheck at this point in time. I think we'll see Goltsov really put a beating on Thiago Santos here. Goltsov will likely be looking for a finish as well. So the under 2.5 around that -130 range, not a bad way to go about it, especially if you want to get a Goltsov at a bit of a discount, maybe take his inside the distance. But I think that we'll see Goltsov put that grappling pressure on Santos, cause Santos a lot of issues, maybe lock up a submission at a certain point. But I think Goltsov pretty much dominates this matchup. And I just don't think that Santos's knockout power threat is as dangerous as it used to be, which will allow Goltsov to kind of get off on his offense a little bit easier here. More often not, taking this fight to the ground and dominating it from there. So give me Goltsov inside the distance and the under 2.5. All right, next up, we got Dakota Ditcheva coming in at -2,000, going up against Chelsea Hackett, who comes in at +1,000. Now, obviously, Ditcheva, the favorite to win this entire thing, outstanding kickboxing background that she has, and that's what she utilized to defeat her last opponent, Lisa Mauldin, by first-round knockout. She's showcasing some grappling techniques as well, showcasing that she's trying to improve that aspect of her game so she can be as complete of a mixed martial artist as possible. She's very fun to watch. She's dynamic, throws in combinations. Probably the highest level women's prospect that we currently have in any mixed martial arts organization. So somebody definitely to keep an eye on. Her opponent this week in Chelsea Hackett, a lot of people know her from falling short on the 2020 season of the Contender series, where she lost to Victoria Leonardo in a fight where she came in as a pretty big favorite. But that was a fight where she bit off a little bit more than she could chew at the time. She was coming in as strictly as a kickboxer and got outgrinded in that matchup and eventually finished in the second round. She took off 3 years, came back for the PFL, defeated Kai Bennett, I think it was PFL or Bellator, either way, one of those promotions, and defeated Kai Bennett with a grapple-heavy approach, showcasing that she is really relying and leaning on the grappling improvements in her training so that she can go out there and be the best mixed martial artist she could be. We already know she has a good enough kickboxing background, so now to tie it together similar to Ditcheva with the grappling, things can get a little bit easier for her. Last time around, though, we did see her get submitted by third-degree BJJ black belt Jenna Bishop. So not a lot of people, again, they're not giving Bishop the respect that she deserves, and they're kind of, ragging on Hackett for end up losing that matchup. But stylistically speaking, it just was not a great matchup for her. In this matchup against Ditcheva, I do think it will be slightly more competitive than the odds indicate here. Now, not to the point that I'm going to go out there and say we should be betting Chelsea Hackett in this spot, but the spot that I'll be kind of honing in on is the over 1.5 around +150. Now, that's a spot that could be taken advantage of because this could be a competitive striking battle, but I do think that Ditcheva will be the one landing the better strikes here. Now, even if Ditcheva looks to take this fight to the ground, I'm not fully sold that her jiu-jitsu is Jenna Bishop level where she'll be able to snatch up a submission or anything against Hackett. I think we'll see those improvements in the grappling realm for Hackett to allow her to stay competitive in this matchup, especially if it ends up hitting the mat. I think where Ditcheva will have the advantage and be most successful in this fight is with her striking approach, but I do think that we'll see some back and forth exchanges in this fight, which will cause this to go over that 1.5 round mark. Chelsea Hackett's is no schmuck. If you remember, she was a pretty big favorite going into the Contender Series matchup against Victoria Leonardo. Was she propped up a little bit too highly? Sure, but she's clearly taken off more than enough time from mixed martial arts, almost 3 years away from competition before returning last year the way that she did, and clearly put an emphasis on her grappling training. So we saw some decent work from her in terms of fending off some of the submission attempts from Jenna Bishop early. It was ultimately the armbar that got her later on in that first round, but you have to give her the credit there. And, she has the skill set to be competitive against Ditcheva here. I'm not betting Hackett. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying try to bank on this fight going into deeper water, and we can go out there and cash the over 1.5 here. So Ditcheva by decision, but the over 1.5 is what I'm liking most in this spot. All right, main event time. The trilogy here between Valentin Moldavsky coming in at -310, going up against Linton Vassell, who comes in at +260. Now, this is a matchup between two guys that split a series in Bellator, where Valentin Moldavsky originally defeated Linton Vassell, and then the second time they met, we saw Vassell land a takedown, get that top position, and smash Moldavsky with elbows to get the first round stoppage. And now they're trying to settle the score here and try to get this rubber match to see who really gets the bragging rights of being the better fighter. Moldavsky Free 6 points against Antti Delia last time around, as Delia seemingly injured his groin pretty much in the first exchange of the matchup, and then he was on the retreat for the rest of it, allowing Moldavsky to just tee off on him. But normally Moldavsky showcases a solid all-around game. Obviously, great wrestling as you would expect from a Russian trained by Fedor, and that team over there has slick striking, good boxing, good kicks as well, but a lot of his power coming from his hands. But it's really his ability to mix in that grappling and that top pressure, which makes him so successful throughout his MMA career. His opponent, Linton Vassell, strong wrestler, grappler in his own right, has some mean power as well early in matchups, as we've seen in the past. But as we saw in the Dennis Goltsov fight earlier this year, if he's unable to establish that top pressure and get his opponents out of there, he does start to slow down late in matchups and does end up giving up those bad positions, which is ultimately how I see him losing this fight here against Moldavsky. Again, Vassell could make things interesting early if he can replicate the takedown and top control that he had from their second matchup, but I think that we'll see Moldavsky a little bit better in terms of his defensive grappling, in terms of his game planning here to not give Vassell those positions and then allow Moldavsky to try to just wear on Vassell. Moldavsky just doing his work, high activity rate, slowing down Vassell, and then eventually pounding him out in the second or third round of this matchup. There you guys go. PFL 4 breakdowns for you guys. There are 2 more PFL events coming up over the next 2 weeks, and I'll have you guys covered with breakdowns for those, so don't worry too much. Obviously, otherwise, Thursday, quick picks for the UFC card will drop for you guys. Friday, we'll have the free parlay, Locky 2-Step, Locky Trinity parlay video drop for you guys, as well as the 3 best prop bets. And then Saturday, I'll see you guys after the fights with my immediate reaction podcast as I normally drop it. Appreciate all the love. Appreciate all the support. Good luck on all your action this week, folks. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Peace.
Last thing.